Once again, it is book review time. I'm holding strong to my 2016 resolution of doing 2 reviews a month, and this is my second review for the month. Today I'm going to be reviewing The Elfstones by Terry Brooks. Hello everyone, it is Samantha. I hope you guys are having a fantastic day. I am here today with another book review, and I am excited in some ways to talk about it. If you have followed my Goodreads updates and Twitter updates for this book, you will know where this is probably going to go, but if not, stay tuned as I review Elfstones by Terry Brooks. The Elfstones by Terry Brooks follows a large cast of characters. It primarily takes place around this event of the Elfstones tree dying. The Elfstones tree is this magical tree that resides in the land of the elves, and it is basically what prevents all of the demons leaking out from these forbidden lands. But the Elfstones is dying, and now the demons are leaking back through into the rest of the world. So the wizard Alanon ends up recruiting Will Almsford and the young Amberly to go about on this quest to collect a new seed to replant and grow a new Elfstones tree to prevent the demons from, basically taking over the world once again. That was a basic summary of this plot. There wasn't too much to the plot overall. That's basically the long and short of it. Overall, I rated this book 2 stars. I really did not like this book. I think the only reason I did not give it 1 star is that it did have some moments where it has some redeeming qualities, and I could see how some people might like it. But me personally, I did not like this book at all. I found it to be extremely repetitive. Terry Brooks repeated so many things so many times. He would literally say something and then say it again 4 pages later to another character, and then the same thing would happen again. So basically you heard the same story about the Elfstones tree dying in full text that he already said to another character, again, like 2 or 3 more times. And it happens throughout the book with multiple things, like extremely repetitive. This book could have been a good 200 to 300 pages shorter than it is. It's about 600 and something pages, this copy, and it could have been easily 300 pages. It was very long-winded. As one of my friends I was reading it with, Connor O'Brien, says, he was telling, not showing you in his writing, and I find that to be very hard to get into. Aside from finding the writing to be repetitive and long-winded, I didn't much care for the characters either. They really didn't start to take on an identity of their own until over halfway through the book, when they actually seemed to have their own personalities. Before that, they all felt very dry and kind of bland, and then some of the characters that did kind of have their own personality, they weren't really focused on them at all throughout the whole book, just a little bit. Like the elf prince was one of my favorite characters because he had some really interesting qualities and interesting personality, but he wasn't really touched on throughout most of this book because this does follow Will and Amberly. Though I have heard that the Elfstones is better than the Sword of Shannara because it isn't as basically a reworking of Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. He was still drawing heavily from Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. And don't get me wrong, I know particularly with a lot of 70s and 80s fantasy, I've read quite a few books written in that time period, drew heavily from Tolkien's work, but Terry Brooks kind of seemed to lack a lot of originality. You could definitely see how he was pulling a lot of influence from Tolkien without kind of creating his own unique topics and characters. So I found that to be really distracting. It wasn't as bad as Sword of Shannara, which was like a blatant retelling of The Lord of the Rings, but it was a little bit better than that, but it just still was not enough to kind of make me feel happy. I just had a really hard time getting into this book. It was a chore to get through. I found it to just be a long slog to the end of the book. It was tough, guys. It was tough. Another thing I didn't much care for was the magic in this book. It seemed very convenient. Basically, you have no inner workings of how this magic works, which usually I'm okay with, but it just felt super convenient. It was like, oh, look, I need to use magic to get out of this tough scrape, so I'm just going to do that right now, and it's going to work perfectly. And it just seemed perfect. It seemed too perfect, if that makes any sense. And there was actually a lot of moments that didn't even have to do with magic that felt very contrived and very convenient. Some of the redeeming qualities for this book were some of these side characters that were introduced, such as these rovers. I found them to be interesting characters, and I found when they went into this wood that was full of thieves and outlaws, I found those kind of side characters to be interesting. But the main characters themselves lacked depth, and they weren't very interesting, and their personalities all felt kind of the same until you got over halfway through the book, and then they kind of started to be their own. Though there were some scenes I liked, and though I liked some of the side characters, I still rated this book 2 out of 5 stars. My personal recommendation would be to just watch the TV show. I'm actually going to watch it today for the first time, so I don't actually know how the show is, but I think if you want to choose between one or the other, I say go for the show. I have heard the show so far is a lot different from the book, so I don't know, we'll see how I feel about it. But the book itself, I did not much care for. I think if you're not a fan of The Lord of the Rings or Tolkien's writing at all, then you definitely will not like this book. And I think that if you like fantasy books that have a lot of events taking place and books that are very character-driven, you will also not like this book because this wasn't very character-driven, and a lot of the events that took place were extremely repetitive, and it didn't feel like a whole lot really happened in the 600 pages of this book. As you guys can tell, I'm not a fan of this book, but I hope this review helped some of you in some way as to what— whoa, man, this book is getting its revenge by hitting me. Anyway, I hope that this review has helped you in some way to figure out if this is a book that you would like. And if you did like it, you'll have to let me know down in the comments your thoughts on it. And if you also didn't like it, you'll have to let me know why you didn't like it too. I would love to hear both opposing opinions, because it's always interesting to discuss kind of a book that's not very well liked and to see both perspectives on it. Alright guys, that is it for my review of The Elfstones by Terry Brooks. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, happy reading. Bye!